My beloved child. The answer your soulmate has been waiting for finally arrived, and the moment they understood what it meant, everything inside them shifted. For longer than you realize, they have been carrying one private question about you, a question they refuse to answer through assumptions, rumors, or temporary emotions. They needed something clearer. Something they could trust. And now, after all that waiting, they have it. But here is what makes this moment so unexpected. The answer was not what they had prepared themselves to hear. It revealed something about you that suddenly made several confusing moments from the past make sense. Your silence. Your distance. The way you seem to understand things without explaining yourself. Even the moments when they wondered whether you had stopped caring. Don't skip, because what they discovered didn't push them away. It made them look back at your connection with completely different eyes. Until now, your soulmate believed they were waiting for confirmation about your feelings, but the real answer went deeper than that. They discovered that what they had interpreted as uncertainty may have actually been patience. What looked like emotional distance may have been you protecting something meaningful instead of rushing it. And that realization hit them harder than expected, because suddenly they had to question their own decisions. There was one moment in particular they remembered immediately. A small interaction between you that seemed ordinary when it happened. Something you said, or perhaps something you chose not to say, stayed quietly in their memory. Now they understand why. Stay till the end, because that memory has become the missing piece they couldn't identify before. And once it clicked, your soulmate stopped asking, "Does this connection mean anything?" They started asking a far more important question. What am I going to do about it now? That question has already led them toward a decision, but they haven't revealed it yet. They are thinking carefully because they know their next move could change the direction of everything between you. The answer they received gave them clarity, but clarity also brought responsibility. They can no longer pretend they don't recognize what has been unfolding. They can no longer hide behind uncertainty. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is another detail connected to this answer that your soulmate discovered only afterward, and this detail is the reason they haven't approached you impulsively. Someone had known part of the truth before they did. Someone close enough to notice what your soulmate kept overlooking. And when that person finally explained what they had observed about you, your soulmate went completely quiet. Not because it was upsetting, but because one sentence confirmed what they had secretly hoped for all along. And now, there is only one question left. What exactly did that person tell them about you? What they heard next changed the meaning of everything. The person who had been watching quietly didn't offer your soulmate some dramatic prediction or impossible promise. Instead, they pointed out a pattern your soulmate had somehow missed. Whenever things became uncertain, you never tried to force the connection. You gave it space. You remained steady. And even when you could have demanded answers, you allowed the truth to reveal itself naturally. That observation stayed with your soulmate because it matched something they had already begun realizing. Your actions had been answering their question long before they received confirmation. Don't skip, because this is where their waiting finally turns into intention. They started replaying old conversations, remembering tiny details they once dismissed, and one particular memory suddenly stood above all the others. It involved a choice you made when nobody was expecting anything from you, and now they understand exactly what that choice revealed. Here is where the story becomes even more personal. Your soulmate remembered a moment when you could have taken the easier path, yet you chose restraint instead. At the time, they misunderstood it. They wondered whether you were pulling away or becoming less interested. But with the answer they have now, that same moment looks completely different. They can finally see that you weren't disappearing, you were waiting for something genuine instead of chasing something uncertain. And that realization created another question they couldn't ignore. Had they been measuring your feelings by the wrong signs all along? Stay till the end, because their response to that question surprised even them. Instead of continuing to analyze you from a distance, they decided they needed to become clearer themselves. No more relying on guesses. No more expecting you to read between the lines. If this connection was going to move forward, they knew someone had to finally say what had remained unspoken. But your soulmate still hasn't made that move, and there is a very specific reason. Just as they were preparing to act on everything they had learned, another piece of information reached them. Something directly connected to you. At first, it seemed small. Almost insignificant. Then they realized it explained why the timing of this answer mattered so much. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate now believes this wasn't simply about discovering how they feel. It was about understanding what they could lose by waiting too long. That thought changed their entire approach. They began considering a conversation they had avoided before, and this time, they don't want to leave anything unfinished. Yet there is one detail they need to understand before they speak to you. And the person who gave them the original answer knows exactly what that missing detail is. That missing detail was finally placed in front of them, and suddenly their hesitation made sense. The person who had given them clarity explained that your soulmate had been focusing so heavily on what you might feel that they had ignored what their own behavior was communicating to you. Every delayed conversation, every unfinished sentence, every moment when they stepped back instead of speaking clearly had created uncertainty from your side too. That realization landed differently. Your soulmate had spent so much time waiting for an answer about you, yet they had never considered that you might have been waiting for an answer about them. Don't skip, because this changed the question completely. It was no longer, "How does this person truly feel about me?" Now it became, "Have I given them any reason to believe I'm ready?" And when your soulmate answered that privately, they knew something needed to change. For the first time, they began looking at the connection from your perspective. They remembered moments when you seemed ready to say more but stopped yourself. They remembered conversations that became strangely quiet whenever the future came up. Most importantly, they remembered one specific moment when you gave them an opening, subtle, but unmistakable now, and they let it pass because they were still searching for certainty. Stay till the end, because that memory became the turning point. Your soulmate realized the answer they had been waiting for wasn't permission to keep watching from a distance. It was a reason to finally become honest. And that is when they started forming the words they want to tell you. Not something rehearsed or overly dramatic. Something simple, sincere, and impossible to misunderstand. But before they could settle on exactly what to say, another realization stopped them completely. They suddenly understood that the conversation they were preparing for could not begin with what they wanted from you. It had to begin with what they needed to admit about themselves. There was a reason they had waited so long for this answer, and it wasn't because you were impossible to understand. Deep inside, your soulmate had been afraid of trusting their own interpretation of the connection. They wanted certainty because certainty felt easier than vulnerability. But now they see the contradiction. They were asking for proof while keeping their own truth hidden. Something huge is waiting for you, because they have decided that when they finally speak, they are going to reveal the one thing they deliberately kept out of every previous conversation. It explains their hesitation, their mixed signals, and why receiving this answer about you affected them so deeply. And the surprising part is that this secret began much earlier than you probably realize. Long before this answer arrived, your soulmate had already experienced one quiet moment that changed how they saw you. They never told you about it because, at the time, admitting its importance would have meant admitting how deeply this connection had affected them. It happened after an ordinary conversation between you. Nothing dramatic was said, yet one sentence stayed in their mind long after everything else faded. They replayed it privately, wondering whether you had meant more than you revealed. That was when their search for certainty truly began. They weren't trying to discover whether you were perfect for them. They were trying to understand why you had become impossible to dismiss. Don't skip, because the answer they received has now brought them directly back to that forgotten moment, and they finally understand what they missed. The surprising truth is that your soulmate had noticed your consistency before they ever questioned your feelings. You remembered small things. You responded differently when something genuinely mattered. You never needed to make every moment dramatic just to prove that you cared. But because your soulmate expected some unmistakable sign, they overlooked the quieter evidence sitting directly in front of them. Now those memories are returning one after another, and each one strengthens the answer they received. Stay till the end, because one memory affected them more than all the others. It was a moment when you had absolutely nothing to gain, yet you still showed them consideration. They dismissed it then. Today, they see it as one of the clearest clues about who you really are. And that realization has pushed them towards something they have avoided for far too long. A completely honest conversation. They no longer want to approach you with another vague hint or unfinished message. They want you to understand why they waited, what answer they received, and why it changed their view of you. But there is still one piece they haven't revealed. Something huge is waiting for you, because while looking back through everything, your soulmate discovered that you once gave them the answer they were searching for without realizing it. It was hidden inside something incredibly simple you said, and now they remember the exact words. The moment they understood their meaning, they knew their next decision could no longer be postponed. This time, they didn't push that memory away. Your soulmate sat with it and finally understood why those simple words had stayed with them for so long. You had never promised anything unrealistic. You had simply shown, in your own quiet way, that real connection should never have to be forced. Back then, they heard the sentence and moved on. Now it feels completely different. It matches the answer they just received about you. Suddenly, your patience no longer looks like uncertainty. Your silence no longer feels empty. And the moments when you stepped back now seem less like rejection and more like self-respect. Don't skip, because this realization has changed what your soulmate plans to do next. Instead of waiting for another sign, they have decided to create clarity themselves. They know they cannot undo every missed opportunity, but they can stop repeating the same pattern. So they began thinking about the first thing they would say if they had your full attention. Surprisingly, it wasn't a confession. It was an acknowledgement. They want to admit that they misunderstood certain moments between you. They want you to know they finally recognize what you were trying to communicate without pressure. Stay till the end, because there is one admission they are especially nervous to make. Your soulmate now realizes there was a specific moment when they almost reached out and told you everything, but something made them stop. And now you are about to understand what stopped them. It wasn't another person, and it wasn't because their feelings disappeared. Your soulmate hesitated because they believed they needed one final answer before taking a step they couldn't easily reverse. That is the answer they have now received. Something huge is waiting for you, because the uncertainty that once kept them quiet is no longer there. But receiving clarity has created an even bigger decision. What happens when they finally bring this truth directly to you? They have already imagined that conversation more than once, and there is one question they desperately want to ask. Yet before they ask it, they intend to tell you something they have kept completely private until now. And that revelation could explain why they waited for this answer in the first place. For the first time, your soulmate is ready to admit what they kept hidden. They noticed the connection much earlier than they ever allowed you to see. There was a point when they realized you had become more than someone they simply thought about occasionally. Your presence stayed with them after conversations ended. Small things reminded them of you. But instead of moving closer, they became more careful because they wanted to know whether this feeling had something real beneath it. That is why the answer they finally received matters so much. It confirmed something they had quietly suspected for a long time, that the connection wasn't built around one dramatic moment. It had been growing through consistency, understanding, and all those little details neither of you could completely forget. But there is another layer they weren't expecting. While reviewing everything that led them here, your soulmate realized you had changed the way they think about closeness itself. Before you, they believed certainty had to arrive first and action could follow later. Now they understand that sometimes clarity appears only after someone becomes brave enough to communicate. Don't skip, because this is where their decision becomes real. They are no longer planning to test you or search for another clue. They want a genuine conversation where neither of you has to guess. And there is one question they have been carrying quietly: if they finally tell you everything, will you still be willing to hear them? That question is why they are choosing their next words carefully. They don't want to arrive with expectations or pressure. They simply want to reveal what the waiting taught them and give you the truth they should have offered sooner. Stay till the end, because something unexpected happened while they were preparing for that conversation. Your soulmate remembered one final detail connected to the answer they received, a detail they originally overlooked because it seemed too small to matter. Now they realize it may be the most important piece of all. It suggests that the timing of this revelation was never really about when they received the answer. It was about what they would choose after receiving it. And they have finally made that choice, the choice they made is surprisingly simple: they are done hiding behind uncertainty. Your soulmate has decided that their next step must be honest, even if they cannot predict exactly how you will respond. For so long, they believed they needed every question answered before speaking. But the answer they received about you showed them something important: they already had enough evidence in the moments you shared. The missing piece was never another clue about you. It was courage from them. And now they are preparing to acknowledge that directly. Don't skip, because they have also decided there is one misunderstanding they need to clear up before they tell you anything else. That misunderstanding goes back to a moment when your soulmate became unusually distant. You may have wondered what changed, but behind that distance was a private struggle they never explained. They had started realizing how meaningful you were becoming, and instead of immediately trusting that feeling, they questioned it. Now they regret allowing their uncertainty to create confusion. The answer they waited for has finally shown them that stepping away didn't make the connection easier to understand, it only left important things unsaid. Stay till the end, because they are planning to address that moment specifically. They want you to know their silence wasn't proof that nothing mattered. In fact, it began precisely because something mattered more than they expected. But here is the detail that changes everything. While preparing what they want to tell you, your soulmate realized there is one question they no longer need answered. They used to wonder whether you had left a lasting mark on their life. Now they know you have. The question that remains is whether there is still room for an honest conversation between you. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate isn't planning to arrive with assumptions about your answer. They want to give you something they should have given you much earlier: complete clarity. And hidden inside that clarity is one admission they have never spoken aloud, an admission about the exact moment they first realized you were different from everyone they had known before.